Hi everyone. Hello. Hi friends. I hope you're doing well. Happy Wednesday. Happy midweek. And hopefully if you're back at work or school or wherever, you're back in your routine. Hopefully it's going okay. And hopefully the weather's okay where you are. Morning, afternoon, evening. Happy time zone. Thanks for joining me. I know we're trying to get back into routine, as am I. I'm trying to get back into streaming and all my creative projects and things like that. Kids are back in school. It's not easy. My kids are 7. One of my kids especially has a hard time with routine changes. So if there's just a little bit of change in routine, it sort of triggers her, and we kind of have to go with the flow and try and keep us all sort of calm and adjusting. So it has been a week. It's been a year. 2026 is off to a weird start. Just in general. But in sort of, looking at it in a good way, it's a new year. It can be a new start for your hobbies, your routines, your books, if you're starting a new planner or journal. I hope that it's going well so far. We're 7 days in, right? So if you've come across the smudges or little spills or pen marks that shouldn't be there, the Snowy Studio, hi! Thanks so much for the follow, and thanks for being here. Sandy, good morning from dark and rainy Seattle. Sandy, I'm just north of you, and I totally get it. It is also blah. It's gloomy, it's rainy, but in like this, it just won't let up kind of way here in Vancouver, so I totally get it. It's like one of those days, right? It's one of those days. And also winter is just like that, so... Hi. Oh, thanks for oh, you're so welcome. This is your first time here. Yay. Thank you so much for the first time chat too. Awesome. I'm so glad you're here, friend. Hopefully I run into you in at pen shows this year. I can't wait. But speaking of pen shows, if you're going to Philly or any of the pen shows that are coming up or stationery events, I hope you have so much fun and plan accordingly. Budget accordingly. Yeah, that's my little spiel. And yeah, let me know if you are going anywhere. And if you missed it, I actually streamed on Monday this week because I kind of want to get into this 2-day-a-week schedule. Last year I tried to do Wednesdays and Fridays. Fridays are I like Fridays because they're super chill, but they're a little bit tough because with holidays, usually the school gives an extra day off on the Friday. And so my kids will be home running around, seeking my attention constantly. So that kind of makes it tough to have a consistent stream schedule. So I'm trying out Monday and Wednesday. And I know Mondays are tough sometimes, especially if you're, going into work or you're sort of starting your week off with a number of projects or trying to get on top of everything. I feel the same, trying to get on top of schools and the kids' schedules and stuff like that. But on Monday, I thought what we could do together is sort of look at our planners or our journals, do some memory keeping, and just some gentle sort of journaling to get us into the week and get us sort of started on, in a slow way, in a very slow way. And so this Monday, I did my first sort of journal with me stream. If you were there, thank you. Or if you watched the VOD, thank you. I appreciate you. I've yet to post it on YouTube. I don't know if I will. I felt like it was kind of awkward for me to get back into the streaming and going with the flow kind of thing live. So I was like, ooh, but we'll see. I did talk about my Hemlock and Oak weekly and daily planner, which I'm using as a memory keeper this year. Hemlock and Oak is a local Vancouver Canadian small shop who specialize in sort of this minimal / classic sort of design of planners and notebooks. And they're very focused on sustainability and environmental friendliness. And so I really like that. I like that sort of value in them. And they gifted me this planner, this chunky textbook-like planner to try out for this year. It's with their new archivist paper. It's a 70 GSM specially formulated paper for hemlock and oak. And so this is their first year trying it out. And yeah, so I wanted to test it and, you know, use it the way that I would if it made sense for my lineup. And so for me, it makes sense to use it as a memory keeper because I already have a plotter A5 that I use as my sort of catch-all planner. So I don't need another one, but I did set it up in a way that I could, in the weekly section, it is undated also. So, you know, I can change around whether or not I use it every week or how consistent I am with it. For now, I'm going to do it every week for memory keeping. So for the first week of January, obviously it was half a week. So I just did sort of a half week memory keeping spread, which means just the highlights of the day that I wanted to document. And then in the daily pages, so there's 368 pages, I think, undated in the back for daily journaling or planning, however you kind of want to use them. It's an A5, so it's a lot of space. And the way I try to or started to use it is for daily journaling, but using prompts. And I'm using a book called The Pivot Year by Brianna West to kind of give me these prompts for everyday kind of reflections and introspection. And then I'm also using a reference book called The Flower Color Guide, and it just has photos of different types of flowers. And so it's just a way for me to practice my drawing skills, or, you know, trying to draw flowers from a reference instead of my usual sort of abstract style of drawing flowers, just going with the flow. I'm actually looking at a reference photo and then drawing them. So that's what I did on Monday. So if that interests you, or if you're kind of into that, or, you know, you're curious, join me next Monday on Twitch, same time, same place, or watch the VOD, the replay, and then you can kind of get a feel for how I'm using this planner for memory keeping and journaling, which is something that's huge in my life. So I thought it'd be kind of fun to share it with you. So, Inky, how's it going? Knowing that Philly is coming up, definitely curbing my current impulse spending. Yeah, for sure. I mean, for me, I'm definitely thinking about the pen shows and the events that I want to go to this year. And then being mindful of how much, same as you, how much I'm spending, but also the kinds of things that I want in my life this year. So being mindful of, like, do I need things in my lineup? Do I need more pens, more inks? And while the answer is always yes, it depends on where I get them from, right? So I want to, if I'm going to acquire more pens and inks, I want to be picky about where I get them. Are they, you know, show limited inks or special kind of inks and stuff like that. So I'm thinking about that too. And also, obviously, with price hikes on pens and probably all kinds of stationery this year, I think that's going to come up over and over again in terms of how we're using what we have, shopping our stash, all those sorts of things. And thank you for the hydrate redemption. So yeah, lots of things to think about. If you weren't here on Monday, Happy New Year. I hope that the new year is off to a great start for you. And yeah, I hope you enjoyed your holidays and transitioned well into the new year in terms of your planning and journaling and just staying on top of everything in your life. What I wanted to do today is it's going to be very chill. Welcome to my stream. What I wanted to do today is I wanted to get back into painting with fountain pen inks. It's been a week, probably more than a week actually, if I'm being honest. It's been because of the holidays. I didn't really get to paint with my inks or play around with them too much. I just kind of got stuck in memory keeping and journaling, and that's okay. It is what it is, right? But I did want to get back into that because it's fun and it's a way for me to relax when I do get moments to just sit and have some quiet time and play with my stationery. I like to pull out inks and paint with them or draw or, do something fun and artsy. So that's what we're going to do today. We're going to do some painting with fountain pen inks in my TRP, Tomoe River Paper notebook. It's the everyday book from Galen Leather. I love using this as my book where I paint, not only because you can hear the crinkle after, which is great ASMR, but also just because the paper in this notebook I got it a few years ago, is really it handles the inks really well. And so I only use one side because it does ghost and sometimes it bleeds through a little bit, but I do put down a lot of ink, so I'm okay with that. And if we have time, or we'll see if we can get into it, but this is my Hahnemühle sketchbook. It's watercolor paper, so obviously it handles inks really well. It also handles paints really well. Because it is watercolor paper. So I wanted to do a little bit of watercolor painting using a palette that I have from Stoneground Paint Co. And yeah, so we could do some painting, floral painting with watercolor paints as well if we have time, but kind of depends, as it always does. Jacqueline streaking 5 streams. Wow. Happy Wednesday, Jacqueline. I hope you're well. I hope your week's going okay. Let's see now. The inks that I'm going to use today, I just grabbed them from my desk. If you are not aware of my ink vials as I drop them, there's a great podcast episode. If you listen to the Pen Addict podcast, I was a guest on it a little while back last year. But look it up because it's called What Number Ink Vial Are You On? And it is about how I, approach creativity and art when it comes to using stationery such as fountain pen inks. And I talk about my ink vial system, but if you're not aware of how I kind of use these, is basically when I get new inks or when I get samples sometimes, or just once in a while, I go through my ink drawer and I take out bottles of inks that I haven't used in a little while, and I put a little bit into an ink vial and I number them. So I have a numbered system that corresponds to whatever ink it is. So I have a list, and I keep a number of ink vials on my desk, and I have about 70 ink vials. Not all of them are filled, but I have up to 70 that I can have on my desk on a stand. And the purpose is that every day I try and pick out at least one ink to play with. And it's just a matter of grabbing my dip pen or my glass dip pen and just doing a quick floral doodle or sketch using the ink. And it's just a way for me to keep using my inks because otherwise I will never use my inks except for when I'm painting or inking up my pens. But also it's a way for me to just remember to take out my inks and play with them. And for me as a visual person, having ink vials sitting there within an arm's length reach on my desk is a great way of reminding myself. I keep looking at them and they're there. They're not going away. So it's a great reminder for me to use them, to play with them, to get to know them. A lot of the times they're inks, actually sometimes they're inks that I just don't tend to ink up because they're either really bright or they're muted, so they might not be as legible if I put them in a fountain pen. And that happens sometimes, right? Or sometimes they're kind of colors where I'm like, I don't think I'm going to use yellow or orange all the time in my pens. But having them sit there for me to play with, I think is a fun way of using up some of the ink anyways. So I picked out a few inks, or 4 inks that I liked. This one is Tom Studio Iris. It's a really, really nice purple color. And then I picked out Diamine and Cult pens. It's called Dusk. And you can see from the shimmer on the bottom, it's a shimmer ink. And then I have Wearingeul White Rabbit. And this is one of those inks that I don't really think I would put into a fountain pen because I don't think it's super legible. You know, you could see it, but it's like, it's lighter than I like to have in my fountain pens. And then the last one is called Mad Hatter, and it's also from Wearingeul. Mad Hatter and White Rabbit are from their Alice in Wonderland collection or line. And they're really, really great ink colors, but I prefer to paint with some of these inks. So that's what we're gonna do. It's good to be, Pop Out Gal, hi friend. Happy New Year. And I know you had a busy busy start to the week, but hopefully it sort of tapers off as you get back into routine and things get slowed down a little bit, hopefully. Corolla, do you remember the Pen podcast where you went over your ink vial? Yeah, wait, Snowy Studio. Did you say that before? Did you write that before I even mentioned it? That's so funny. Yes, that's the podcast episode I'm talking about, the ink vial system. It's still such a funny episode when I think back about it because I don't think I meant to really bring them up too much. I don't know why. I'm just like, I have ink vials. And I keep them on my desk, and there's a lot of them, and I number them, and I use them. But yeah, I was kind of like, oh, should I go into the system? It is a system. And I'm glad I did because I think there were a few people that kind of said, like, I do something similar, you know, but I should keep doing it. And remember, you know, when you get new inks, do this. Throw it into an ink vial. Oh, and the other way to use ink vials is when you're cleaning out pens and you have ink left in them and you're one of those people that doesn't want to just dump ink into, you know, down the drain. Definitely throw it into an ink vial or on a paint palette and paint with it or play around with it because, you know, the ink is good. So unless, you know, you don't like the ink or the color just doesn't jive with you, then definitely get rid of it. But if it's a good color and you like it, then I highly, highly recommend throwing it on a paint palette. You know, just throw it into, or like a vial, or, you know, if you have those sample vials that you get like sample inks in, repurpose them, clean them out, repurpose them, throw inks into them, and then have fun with them. I need to go find that. Yeah, I forget what episode number it was, but it was from March of 2025. So first I need to stop getting pens and switch to more inks. Yes, definitely. I mean, I'm not going to say don't get pens, but I'm going to say, you know, use your pens and get more ink. Definitely play around with them. March of 2025. And it was during the time when Mike, who's the co-host with Brad on the Pen Addict, he was on paternity leave, and so Brad was he had a few guests on the podcast, and he asked me to be one of them. So I was like, okay, great, let's talk about, you know, doing artsy things. And yeah, it was really, really fun. Actually, this one is shimmery, so I'm gonna just swirl it around a little bit. It was a lot of fun, but yeah, kind of funny too. And just that we started talking about, you know, the things you can do with inks, the different ways you can sort of have fun and be creative with them. Because, you know, a lot of times, obviously, like when I first started with fountain pens and fountain pen inks, and I got bottles and bottles of inks, I thought, okay, like, I'm never going to go through these inks. But I still wanted to explore more brands and different colors to see what I really liked. And so I just kept accumulating bottles and then thought, I need to swatch with them. And actually, the Snowy Studio, I love the way that Clarissa does ink swatches in such a creative way. And I remember at the time, like around the time where I was sort of playing around with the way I was painting with my inks, I remember the Snowy Studio. I was like, wow, I love this process of just putting down ink, moving it around, seeing what kind of shapes you make out of it and stuff. I just found that so relaxing. And definitely was such an inspiration and still is an inspiration. So, yeah, so I love, finding different ways of playing with ink and different ways of swatching them as well. Like I've said previously, a big reason I kind of mentioned, when you're painting or playing with inks, it's a way to use up inks. But a big reason for me why I do that in the first place is because when I put down ink and I play with it and I paint with it, I feel like I experience it more than I do if I just ink up a pen with it. Because a lot of times you have these like secondary or tertiary, different properties to inks that you might not see, if you're using a pen, especially if it's extra fine or medium nib. And while I do tend to use, broad or broader nibs, still I kind of find that I miss out on like shading and sheen and, the properties that kind of stand out. So when you put a high concentration of ink, or you're kind of using a bigger surface area for that ink, I feel like I just experience so much more and enjoy it a lot. And so I guess that's where the joy comes out of painting and sort of doing this abstract art, is because I kind of get lost in just putting down the ink on paper. And while I'm not focusing so much on what the end piece is going to look like, or what I'm going to do with it or draw on it or anything like that, what I'm more focusing on is just like having fun with the ink, right? Yeah, no, thank you. Playing with inks is super relaxing, right? Super relaxing, super fun. Such a great way of trying out your inks and testing them and getting to know them. And then a lot of times I'm kind of like, oh, I love this ink so much. And sometimes it ends up in a pen, and sometimes it's just one of those inks that I do a lot of painting with. So I got new paintbrushes for this year, specifically for painting with inks. So my usual paintbrushes are nondescript. They're non-branded. They're just like whatever brand. And this is sort of my old set from last year where they're kind of, they're well loved. And so I got another set for this year, fresh. They're fresh and crisp. Haven't been used yet. So I think I'm going to break them in. Not that I'm going to throw out the previous paintbrushes, but it's just like, it's kind of nice to use different shapes as well. Like my usual go-to is like a typical round brush, or something that has a lot of bristles, a lot of it can sort of cover a lot more area, because then that way I can use a lot more ink. But I kind of like the shapes of these two because these will make it easier to kind of do leaves, or brush strokes where you kind of want to have like edges and you want to do some edging. So I don't know, I thought it was kind of interesting. So I think we'll use a few of these as well. Maybe we'll use one of these for the green. Yeah, so let's break these in. And what I usually do is I use one paintbrush per ink color. Not that you have to do that. You can definitely use one paintbrush, or you can even use a water brush, which I also do sometimes, especially if I'm out, like if I'm at a meetup or an event or something. I'm not going to take out all of my paintbrushes. Just using one paintbrush is fine. But when I'm at home, I like to take out different paintbrushes, and then dedicate one to each color if I can, depending on how many inks I guess I'm playing with. But definitely protect your desk area. And I usually have 2 water jugs or water jars just to do some dipping and stuff like that. They are very crisp. Yeah. It's G. Oh yeah, SF. I know. SF is so fun. SF is always a good time. Overwhelming, but a good time. Hi, Brooklyn Becca. How's it going? Welcome back. So yeah. So let's swatch these inks. So if you are joining later or you forget which inks we're using, which I probably will, let's swatch them. And I'll write the name down so we can refer to it. This is going to be the green. And oh yeah, this one's a really nice one. It's a shimmer ink and a collaboration between Diamine. Is it Diamine or Dominant Industry? Dominant Industry. Why did I say Diamine? Dominant Industry and Cult Pens. And it's called Dusk, which is really, really pretty. But definitely one of those inks that I feel like when I paint with it, I just experience it so much more because the underlying colors kind of come out. So you start to see like a little bit more purple. It kind of looks a little bit more like lavender. Whereas in a pen, I just think gray, gray, shimmery gray. And then we have green. Or a really, really dark, or not dark, but gray-green. So those are the 4 colors that we're playing around with. When I'm painting on watercolor paper, I tend to use a little bit more water too, just because the paper can handle it, but also because then you don't use a ton of ink, which is fine. Like I'm never stingy on how much ink I'm using up because I will not use up the whole bottle, even if I tried. So it's not a big deal. But on watercolor paper, because it can absorb a lot more water and ink, you can play around with a lot more water. Which is really fun because then you can play around with like saturation and lighting or a lighter shade of that color versus, overly saturated or like, the true ink color where it's really, really dark. Just by adding a little bit of water, it lightens it up a little bit. But, on TRP, I'm a little bit mindful of how much water I'm putting down. I don't want to weigh it down too much. And also I don't want to wait too long for it to dry because when I'm doing my floral art, this is how I start. I just put down ink, wait for it to dry, and then I draw on top. And so, especially if I'm doing it on stream, if I'm waiting too long for it to dry, I kind of forget or I move on to something else, as one does. And coming back to it is sort of like, I think I'm done. I had my free time. I played around, you know, had fun with inks, and I'm ready to move on. And so for me to come back to something is kind of like it, I let it dry, and then I, you know, sit and sort of finish the piece and then move on. But there are pieces in this book where I did put down the ink and then I just like did not go back to it, and it's fine. I think there's one where I actually didn't intentionally go back because I liked the way that it looked without adding line work on top. If I can find it, I'll show you. Let's see. Oh, here it is. No. I will find it. Here it is. This. And after I played around with the inks, the green sort of, it was starting to blend with the pink. I used 2 colors. That's it, like, it just, it's really funny. I used 2 colors and I was just playing around with the ink. And then I kind of watched how the green blended with the pink. And then after it dried, I was like, this is just so pretty on its own. It's very much abstract, but, you know, to me, it just looked really, really cool. And so I just left it, and it's okay. It's fine. So sometimes, you know, if you run out of time to complete your piece or whatever, it's fine. It's okay to move on. It won't take away from the time that you did have fun, the time that you did sort of spend with the ink. You know, that will always be worth the time. That will always be worth it. So if you don't have time to go back to it, or if you're kind of thinking like, I don't have time to do all of this, it just looks so intense. Number one, it doesn't take a lot of time, but also if you really don't have a lot of time, which, you know, happens, I would still encourage you just to put down ink, or just to paint with something, or just to draw, and then move on. It's okay. You don't have to feel like you've completed a piece or you've completed something to feel like you had, you know, you had fun. Like it's still worth the time. It's never a waste of time to take out your stationery and have some fun with it. To me, anyways. And it same goes with planners and journals, or journals specifically, because a lot of times we open up our journal and we're like, I need to write something profound. I need to write something about my day or my life that I can look back on, and it will be, you know, something big and important and worthy of this lovely paper and using a fountain pen. And I feel like that's just not true. I think that taking out your journal, just the act of doing that and putting anything down on paper is worth the time. And even if you write down, you know, survived or got through today somehow, you know, it's fine. I think it's worth still putting that down, because it's worth celebrating that you got through the day, and there probably is at least one little moment in that day where you smiled, or you felt a little joy, or you laughed. And I still think that's worth commemorating, or writing down, noting down. So yeah. Wow, it's lovely. Hi, Spicy. How's it going? Oh, wow, Curly, you made it effortless. There is 0 effort. I'm putting in no effort. And it kind of looks like it. It looks like anyone can do this, and anyone can. Trust me, it is very little effort because it's just putting down ink. Yeah, the colors are pretty good, eh? I kind of wanted to go with a little bit more, I don't know, not like dark colors, but you know, like in line with probably wintry sort of theme. That's just how it is. What just happened? I don't know. I don't know what's happening, but we'll see. We'll see what happens in the end there. So this one is Mad Hatter. And this seems a little darker. I think I probably have a little bit of a saturated version in my ink vial because it is down to the last little bit. And I've had this in this ink vial a little while. And so what happens is some of the water content evaporates and it just makes it very saturated. So just adding a little water back in brings it back to or closer to the original ink color, which here this is the saturated version. So adding a little bit of water just tones it out a little bit, I think. Yeah. So yeah, this paint brush is interesting because you can angle it to get certain lines. So it's kind of like, you know, you can get like a squarish line or you can angle it to the side and get these sort of leafy shapes. So again, just playing around with it. So we'll see. We'll see where we end up, but no pressure. And I kind of like the saturated version of this ink too, but this is closer, I think, to what Mad Hatter is. It's sort of like a grayish green. It's not too dark. So we'll just add some green in between. And that's the green. I'm starting to love how paper becomes. Do you mean like crinkly spicy? Warped? Happy new ink day to you. Indy, what ink did you get? Lamy Crystal Barrel. I'm just reading down the chat. Lamy Crystal Barrel. Pretty pinky purple. Ooh, that's nice. That's in line with this. It's on theme. Yeah, I'm so glad you joined too, the Snowy Studio. I'm so glad you were able to make it. And we kind of chatted about it on Instagram a little while ago, and I was like, I hope she comes. The more people, the merrier. The more fun, especially in chat. I love when, you know, people are able to lurk or just have me on in the background or watch the replay. It's totally fine. But chat is fun when you're in there and just, you know, sharing new ink day and things like that too. So I'd love to celebrate along with you. Even though I don't have a new ink, but it's like I do because, you know, I know the excitement. Super, super fun. Today is your first time ever on Twitch? What? Welcome to Twitch. Welcome to Twitch. So, yeah, so the Snowy Studio, the reason why I like to stream on Twitch versus YouTube, like I like both platforms obviously, but one of the things about Twitch that I really enjoy is the chat function, and that you could reply to people and just easily kind of converse, and there's like, you know, yeah, emojis or whatever, like little things that you can add, kind of just make it engaging. And yeah, so Gravitas, welcome in. First time chat. First time here in literally 7 years. Yeah. It's changed a little bit in 7 years, is that like it's not just for gamers, right? Like it's for crafters, for people, for artists, for people who like to do art or just like share. Like I've seen people who crochet or scrapbook or, you know, journal, all sorts of different things on Twitch, which is super fun. I love the community here. Like it's kind of cool. So the other thing I love too is that you can follow other creatives and, you know, people in the community on Twitch. So the Pen Addict is here, Olive Octopus, G's Crafties, April Penguin's post on Substack. I say that because we know April is Penguin's creative, but yeah, and like so many more, right? Mike, Independence Mike. So there's, you know, a bunch of people here that, you know, stream throughout the week. And so it's kind of fun to like jump from person to person just to like continue, you know, this feel of like, we're all kind of hanging out a little bit. So you need to DM me. Yes, there's a replay. You can watch it on Twitch. So they're called VODs. Video on demand, so you can watch a replay of someone's stream when you go to their profile or their feed, so it should be up. But also I tend to copy over or export the replay to YouTube, so it takes me a couple of days because, you know, I have to write a description and blah blah blah. SEO it for YouTube. And then I usually share that on Instagram, that there's a replay available. And then I have photos of what I did on stream. So I try and do that when I can, like within a few days or so, or in that week. Let's say in that week. I try and do it in that week. So hopefully if you're not able to join in person or live, which is, I totally get it. It's during the day. People are at work or, you know, doing things. But this is this is the best time I can sort of do my art and stuff and not be interrupted. So it works for me, but if you can join, it's totally cool too. You got a sample and then had to get the whole bottle, Indy. I totally get it. That's how it is, right? That's how it was with a recent bottle that I got actually over the holidays, or right before the holidays, I think. Sailor Shikiri Kamoshika is such a gorgeous color. It's very it's a dark color. It's kind of like a dark gray mauve, you know, dark purpley gray. But I tried, or maroon maybe too. It's sort of one of those colors where you're like, what? It's so dark. But I loved it so much. I had a sample someone gifted me and I was like, I love this color. So I had to get a bottle. The best reason to be on Twitch is for Corolla. Oh, I appreciate you. You know that. There are lots of good people to watch. I know. There's so many good people. Brian Anderson, too. Like, it's just, like, the list goes on, right? Whether you're into, like, pen repairs and you're like, I just need to ask a question about a vintage pen or a pen that I'm using that might need a repair. Brian Anderson. Or Brad streams are always fun. 3 days a week too, so. Plus the friends in the chat. Yeah, chat's always like a fun place to hang out, I find. Every time I hop into someone's stream, it's always like, who's in chat? Because I feel like, you know, that sort of brings everyone together too. It's like asking questions or sharing what's going on, you know, feel free. Like always, don't worry about jumping into chat. You're not bothering anyone, as long as you're kind. As long as you're kind. That's what this in this stream, we're kind to each other and we're super casual. I'm kind of new to Twitch, only been here less than a year, Indy. Oh, that's awesome. I got into Twitch because I started watching Job's Journal, our friend Job in the community. And Job was, journaling. And so I started watching Job's streams, I think in 2020 or 2021, something like that. And then I found that there were a bunch of people on Twitch. Then I found Brad was on Twitch, and yeah, it just went from there. And then I just started like watching everyone. And then eventually, I guess it was last year was my first official year of streaming on Twitch. So, and I love it. And I love this community. I love when people join and make it what it is. So my husband and I started a Twitch stream in 2020 to play Jackbox games. That's awesome. We did get burnt out of that a few years ago. Yeah. Corolla makes me want to learn to paint. Yes. Well, that's why I wanted to stream more, is because I wanted to encourage people to use their stationery. Use your stationery to play with it, to have fun with it, to not feel so much pressure about like having to use it a certain way. Like really, I'm showing you how like simple it can be. It is about practicing though. Like as much as, I like to say, just jump in, throw ink on paper. You have to do it consistently in order to come up with, the process of doing it in a way that's conducive of how much time you have, right? Because we all have a limited amount of time, and we have to make time for this kind of stuff. We have to make time for art sometimes. We have to make time to be creative sometimes. And while it's worth doing that, I feel like when you make the most of the time that you do put aside, you're more likely to do it again. And the more you do it again and again, the easier it becomes and the more confident you are at it. So it really isn't about having the skills or being an artist or, knowing what to draw or how to draw it or knowing how to paint even. You don't need to know any of those things. You don't have to know any of that but you do need to set aside time and keep doing it. So thanks so much for the follow, Gravitas. I appreciate you. Thanks for being here. Thank you for having me. Of course. Yes, so lovely to see friends here too. You need to go back to work. Oh, thanks so much for joining, Clarissa. Have a great week, and I'll talk to you later. I can't believe it's been a full year for you. Yeah, I know. I think I started streaming. Ooh, I have to actually look up when I started, but it would have been probably, I'm going to say like March or April or something like that. I should look that up. When's my Twitch anniversary? Yeah. Excellent reminders. They are just reminders. We all know these things, right? I feel like deep down we know. You just have to do something over and over. We should practice more with art and creativity. But it is, setting aside the time, dedicating time and effort, right, of getting your supplies out or having the supplies that you need on hand. Yeah, right? So I get it. I totally get it. Okay, so this is almost dry. You can see a little bit of wetness still there. But I find that on TRP, it doesn't take too long to dry, especially good TRP, It doesn't take too long to dry, even if you put down quite a bit of ink. But in the meantime, let's swatch the inks. Okay, let me just... So I'm just going to write down the inks that I used so that we don't forget. So this was Tom Studio, Iris, This is Dominant Industry. And Cold Pens. Dusk. And the only shimmer ink I used. Wearingeul White Rabbit, and then the last one is also Wearingeul. Mad Hatter. Those are really cool colors. Yeah, I kind of like them. Or I like them. And I find that, like Dusk especially, I haven't really played around with in a little while. And so I thought, I started with that. I was like, I think I should do something, have a little bit of fun with this. And then I thought that would pair really well with purple. Just because it has that underlying sort of purple tone. And then White Rabbit is a really nice go-to sort of accent color. With a palette like this. It doesn't attract a lot of attention, but it also softens your colors a little bit. And I like painting with lighter colors because when you draw on top, it's easier to see your lines. Whereas sometimes when you're doing darker colors, Iris is a little bit like that, where if I use a lot more of the saturated ink without muting it with water a little bit or desaturating a little bit with water, if it's really, really dark, then if I draw on top, you're not really going to see the lines. So I kind of like to lighten it up a little bit. And then Mad Hatter, just because the colors here are a little bit on the darker, sort of moodier side. So I went with a green that's not as vibrant. And it's sort of, sometimes it depends what the other colors are. Sometimes I go with a little bit of a brighter green, like here. And then other times I kind of go with the darker olive tones work really well. So with this is like a really bright green Esterbrook quirky leaf. Just because the other colors can take, they kind of complement and go along with that palette. So it's kind of fun to, trying to decide what colors to play around with or to paint with. Don't get too bogged down with trying to decide on inks and stuff. And I say that because I'm the kind of person, when I'm thinking about inking up a fountain pen for the month, I go through that process where I'm like, ooh, what color should I go with? And sometimes it takes a little while. And I love that process, like trying to decide what inks I'm going to use for the coming month, what pens are going to go in, etc. So I don't like to spend too much time on figuring out which inks I'm going to paint with because I do it frequently. So it's like, it's okay, just pick out, start with one color and then try and complement it with a couple of other colors. And if you're going to do something similar to this, like a bouquet style or something like that, then I usually end up with a green because I know that's what the leaves are going to be. So yeah, I don't like to spend too much time on it. And instead, I like to be surprised when the colors look really well together, where I'm kind of like, oh, okay, I guess they do kind of work together. Sometimes they don't. Sometimes they clash a little bit. I'm like, oh, maybe they're not the best fit. But it doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter. Like when you're thinking about just like painting a bouquet or something like that, do it and then move on. But sometimes I look back and I think, maybe I should throw this ink into a pen or something like that. And it's kind of fun to explore it that way. Olive Octopus, hi. How's it going, Lisa? Yeah, I like these colors for sure. Yeah, get to creating. Get to creating. Start painting with them. So this is pretty much dry. in that time. Yay. Okay, so now we're gonna do some drawing. So for this, I always use the same ink, but if this is your first time joining, this one's a Kakimori pigment black ink. And I use it specifically for painting, or for drawing, sorry. I use it specifically for drawing because it's a pigment ink, so pigment inks, you have to be a little bit more mindful when you're using them in a fountain pen that you use them continuously so they don't dry up and make it hard to clean out. But they're great for using with dip pens as well. So I'm using a Kakimori stainless steel nib. Great pair, obviously, with their inks. But yeah, I like using them with dip pens just because, like, clean out your dip pen really nicely. But you know, you'll be fine. But the other reason why I like using this ink is because it sits really nicely on top of other inks. And so it doesn't, what's it called? It doesn't really get absorbed or drift off into the background. It sort of sits on the foreground and it draws attention to what I'm drawing. And so that works really well, especially when I'm doing really quick line art on top where I just need those lines to, you know, represent where those flowers are. And so you'll see when I'll show you what it looks like on the purple, but yeah, when you're using saturated or really dark colors and you're drawing on top, sometimes it's hard to see. And so if you're painting with a darker color, add a little bit of water as you go. Just desaturate it a little bit so that when you draw on top, if you want to, then you can see it a little bit better. And sometimes the saturated part of the blob it can be, like for me, I sort of think that is like the center of the flower or something where it can sort of, you know, it can draw attention and just kind of sit there as like, you know, the center, and then everything sort of comes or moves outward from there. And the other reason why I love using a dip pen with this pigment ink is that, you know, you can angle it different ways, not just to use up the ink that sits on the nib, but also just to give your lines a little bit of interest. And this nib holds a lot of ink in its grooves. So I find that I don't need to dip too much. So that all was like in one dip. Oh, thank you so much for the hydration. Redemption. I always have to remind myself for sure. So thank you. And that's that. Literally took a few minutes. So it doesn't take too much time. I find it is really just like waiting for the ink to dry. You have to be a little bit patient there because otherwise, yeah, you will end up with inky messes, which is totally fine, but probably not what you want to go for. So yeah, I'm gonna let it dry, but I just wanted to point out the little bit of shimmer that you see from Dominant Industry and Cult Pen's Dusk. So I think it's a rose gold shimmer in the sort of like gray with a little bit of purple undertone. But you can see the shimmer start to stand out a little bit. And the lovely part, oh, here too, the lovely part about painting with shimmers is that because you're moving around the ink, it tends to sort of blend with the other colors as well. And so even though the other three colors I used are standard inks, so they have no shimmer in them, it's kind of interesting to see the shimmer sort of bleed into those inks as well. It's kind of like with the White Rabbit, there's a little bit of dusk in there, so you get a little bit of shimmer transfer. It's just really kind of nice. So that's the part I really love about painting with inks as well, is once it's dry, just kind of exploring the inks a little bit. Don't close your book and walk away, right? Like, take the time to appreciate the inks that you used and the colors that came together, sometimes when they're blending a little bit. And that's what I meant about the surprise of how it sort of works together. Whereas when you start out, you're kind of like, I don't know, maybe the colors don't work together, or one is really dark, others are a little bit lighter. You have a shimmer ink, which you don't know what's going to happen, right? Shimmer is, it'll do what it wants to do. But it's kind of fun to take a look at them after and appreciate them a little bit, They're doing their thing, and it's really, really pretty. There's obviously a reason why you have the inks that you have, unless you were gifted sample inks or something like that. And then in that case, just explore them. If you like them, you like them. If you don't, move on. But a lot of times when we buy bottles of inks, there's a reason why. There's something about the shade or the ink itself that you wanted to try, or something that drew you to that color. And if you paint with it or explore it in this kind of way where it's just, just let it go, just go with the flow and see what you make of it, then I find that, it's easier to reconnect and to engage with inks. And sometimes, like I said, there are bottles of inks that just sit around that you may not use regularly or even for like months at a time. But if you have them in little ink vials or you take them out regularly, maybe you don't have a lot of bottles of inks, and that's fine. But if you take them out regularly and you take out a few drops, throw it into a paint palette, take out some paint brushes or a paintbrush and play around with it a little bit, then it sort of helps you reconnect with the ink that you're using and why you got it in the first place, or why it's in your collection. Like, why do you even have it? If you don't enjoy it, why do you have it, right? And if you don't enjoy it, then definitely use it up. Throw it into your sketchbooks or your journals, or throw it onto a notebook, and then move on. So we have a little bit of time, which is great, because I want to do a little bit of painting with watercolor paint. So I'm just gonna all right. Move some things around, and I have this Stoneground Paint Co palette that I got last year, and it's Stoneground Paint is actually a Canadian company, so these are handmade paints. This palette is a collaboration they did with the Minty Gardener, Sarah Simon. And she's amazing. If you follow her on Instagram, she does like workshops and she has books out and stuff. She's an amazing floral painter, artist. She does really nice drawings and paintings. And so they did a collaboration palette with her, which is sort of like the colors that she would turn to if she was doing floral paintings and things like that. So it was really interesting. So I got the palette last year, but I think I've only sort of played around with it a couple of times, and I want to do more of that. So let's just kind of do something similar to what I just did with the fountain pen inks, but we're going to do it with watercolor paints because just another medium, another way of exploring colors and exploring blending and how they sort of work together and things like that. And just having fun. Again, it's all about just having fun, going with the flow, and enjoying what you're using. So I'm just going to use one paintbrush for this. I do keep my ink paintbrushes, or the paintbrushes I use with my fountain pen inks and the ones I use with watercolor paints separate, just because I don't want crossover between fountain pen inks and watercolor paints. So I have a few paintbrushes that are really, really nice that I use with watercolor paints. This one is a travel paintbrush from Beam Paints. And yeah, it's very handy to travel with. It's very portable, but also it's a great paintbrush. It's just a round paintbrush, number 4. So I'm going to do something similar. I'm going to use this paint palette, and I'm going to transfer a little bit of the paint onto the palette as I kind of play around with them. But again, nothing too intense. But because this is watercolor paper, you can obviously use way more water. Just throw a bunch of water and paint on here to play around with it. For me, it's more about playing with the colors and playing with blending, you know, practicing painting in general. Not thinking too much about like what I want it to look like. And because you can throw a lot of water on here, you can also layer your paints, which is really nice. So once you have a color down, you can go in and add a little bit more color, do a little bit of blending, or just kind of adding another color on top. Really, anything you feel like, I think. And also because it's watercolor paper, it takes, it can take a little bit longer to dry if you're just continuously adding water and paints. If you're layering one on top of each other. So you can kind of, you know, keep working and keep blending, keep sort of playing around. And I love that. So, and with this, I find, for me personally, I take out my watercolor paints when I have a little bit more time to actually play with it and to have you sort of sit with it and explore a little bit more. I find that with fountain pen inks, I can sit at my desk and I can just, if I have a few minutes, take out a couple of ink vials, do some drawing or painting or whatever, and kind of move on. And for me, the longer paint sessions or art sessions that I have is typically with watercolor paints, just because I want a little bit more time to play with the colors, play around with mixing. A lot of times I have to kind of remind myself of like different techniques, how you sort of blend colors or mix them on paper, so I tend to spend a little bit more time exploring. And that's also fun. I've been playing with watercolors for a little bit now. Yeah, you love them. It's more forgiving when you're learning to paint. Yeah, for sure. I've only really done watercolors. I've done a little bit of acrylic. I tried oil maybe once or twice. And I feel like watercolor just sort of clicked with me, probably because of how similar it is to fountain pen inks. You're just kind of playing with water and like, in that kind of form. So I just felt like it was a little bit of an easier transition, or for me to understand it anyways. So yeah, I agree. Just enjoy it a little bit more, I think. And while I do a lot of painting with fountain pen inks, and that's probably what I share the most on socials. I find though that I think, what I spend more time on practicing or honing, how I'm doing it, I think is watercolor. Just because I feel like there's, I feel like there's more you can do with it. There's more you can learn by practicing with it that I apply to how I paint with fountain pen inks too. And always in the style of, just kind of going with the flow, not overthinking things too much. Because again, I can't put too much pressure on myself to be really good at like fountain or watercolor paints or things like that, because I don't know. I feel like as soon as you put that pressure on yourself, like I have to paint flowers or I have to paint, XYZ, whatever. I find that as soon as I put that kind of pressure on myself, then I start to overthink, and then I'm like, oh no, this was a mistake. I shouldn't have done that. And I feel like we do so much of that in our daily life, especially as parents, especially as, adults who have responsibilities or care for other people or, whatever you do. As soon as you have responsibilities or, you have expectations in your daily life, we don't need that in art. We don't need to put all sorts of expectations on having fun. And that's one thing I'm always reminded of that by my kids, because they will literally take a really nice notebook that I get them from the pen show, which I flew all the way to SF for. And they will just scribble in it, or just take out all their markers and just draw in it. I'm like, you're using up all the pages, and yet they're having so much fun and enjoying it. And at the end, they're like, I love this notebook. It's so great. And, and it's that reminder of use your stationery, have fun with it, because that's what it's meant for. Why not, right? Why not use up all the pages as long as you're enjoying what you're doing? And so, yeah, it's a great reminder constantly. And I'm always like, yeah, I should take out those really nice, paints or those nice pens or whatever. And I should just paint with them or, fill up the pages. Who cares? Who cares if I use up the book? There will be more. So, yeah, everything I'm telling you, I learned from my kids too, as reminders. So, definitely things to think about and to keep in mind, right? Yeah. That's always good. It's always good. Okay, I'm going to, I guess I'll swatch these colors as well. I use a sketchbook for painting with fountain pen inks as well as watercolor paints. So, if you do have, watercolor paper, definitely try out fountain pen inks on them as well. Like we said before, because fountain pen inks behave similarly to watercolor paints in that you can play around with water as the base and blend them and things like that. So to an extent, I guess. But so having, paper that's really nice and works really well for, water-based inks or mediums is useful. And sort of use them for both if you wanted to, which is what I do. All right. I think we're gonna let this dry too. So I can draw on it. This might take a little bit. Let's see. I think I have a spot here where it's very wet, but that's okay. I love watching the movement of water too, which is probably why watercolor paint and fountain pen inks are up my alley, because it's just watching the movement, watching them blend is really fun. Is interesting, at least. It's just kind of watching the flow of water. see. All right. Yeah, it is pretty. Thanks, Indy. What sketchbook are you using for watercolor? It's a Hahnemühle watercolor sketchbook in the horizontal. So it's a little bit of a fancy sketchbook, but really good quality watercolor paper. So not that you need to use that, because I also use, like when I just use loose watercolor paper, I just use the Canson XL watercolor paper pads. And sometimes I cut them down into smaller pieces, like 4x6 or something like that. Just because if I do a big piece, then obviously it takes longer to dry, which is fine if I have the time. But a lot of times when I'm painting, especially if it's on stream, I usually cut it down to a smaller sort of manageable size. But that's just, you know, regular sort of watercolor paper. But I like that sketchbook, so I got that late last year and sort of made a commitment to, because I do a lot of, you know, sort of painting and ink exploration in TRP notebooks. I wanted to do it also on watercolor paper, where I can do a lot more water, you know, throw a lot more water on there. So yeah, that's pretty, right? Very, very nice. I think there's a little bit of a spot that's still, there's still wet, but I like how it sort of turns out where you have your inks, right? You have, you know, whatever blobs you put down, but having the line drawing on top sort of focuses your eye in certain places and what you should be looking at and what, you know, what you're kind of suggesting the subject is, which is florals. So I think we're good with that. And so that's that. This is still drying, I think, a little bit. Which is totally fine, but very nice. Sometimes when I paint with watercolor paints, I use the pigment ink to draw on top of it, like in this one. But then sometimes I just take a fine liner, a little bit of a thicker point, and draw on top. And that's what I do in my in-person workshops, or, you know, when I want to kind of do it on the go. Just because, you know, carrying around or having pigment ink plus a dip pen to draw, you know, on top just is that extra sort of step and extra tools that you may or may not have. And so you sometimes, you know, when I have a certain amount of time that I'm working with for whatever reason, I usually just take out my Tombow mono drawing pen is my go-to in 05 or 06. You know, one of those broader sort of points, because then it'll still stand out, you know, you'll still sort of see those details. But one, it's faster drying, obviously, because you're not throwing ink on top of your paints. And then also the other thing is it doesn't take away from the colors that you have on your paper. Especially if, like, sometimes I do a small piece, or, you know, sometimes I sort of take up more space when I'm painting. Sometimes it takes up the whole space. But if I'm doing a smaller piece and I'm kind of playing around with the colors, I do want to see those colors, right? I don't want to cover them up with black line work. And sometimes that happens when, you know, you're using a dip pen or something that it stands out. Like in this one, I really like it because the contrast of that black pigment ink on sort of these bright colors of paint is really interesting. And it stands out to me. I really like the statement that it makes. But a lot of times when I'm using some more, more of these muted colors, and they're kind of, desaturated a little bit and softer, I don't want to throw dark pigment color on top. So in those cases, usually I just use a fine liner and I add a little bit of line work just so it's not like, when I look at this, it's very abstract. And that's the whole point. The whole point is to keep it very high level abstract, nothing too intricate or too detailed. And then I go over with fine liner just to add a little bit of line. Jello, wow, these are so amazing. Thank you so much. Thanks for the first time chat. Welcome in. I've used loose watercolor paper, but I love a sketchbook to take with me. Yeah, a talent sketchbook. It's not meant for watercolor per se. Okay, I don't think I've heard of it, but yeah, I was like reaching for my sketchbook and it's right here. I like this size specifically. And you can tell with my TRP notebook, it's a standard size. And so, you get a lot more vertical space than you get horizontal. And I do like this because I like having the swatches at the bottom or the top, it depends. It depends how you want to set up. But I kind of like it on, either end. And usually I just do it on the bottom and I have this much space. In my mind, I can sort of, see where the color needs to be. And so that's what I work with. And so that's why when I was looking for a sketchbook with watercolor paper specifically, I thought this is really cool because this is meant to be horizontal, even though obviously you can use it vertically. There's no rule. There's no either way. You can use it whichever way you want. But I thought in my mind, it made sense to use it horizontally, and then close it off. And that way I'm working this way. I'm working, horizontally, have the swatches on one end, and then, flip vertical if I want to. So I just thought that's kind of nice. But either way, it's kind of, either you're doing portrait or landscape versus like, being forced like in an A5 or a square or something like that. So very, very portable. And yeah, I do recommend if you want to get a watercolor sketchbook, definitely, get one that's portable or one that's like, not too hefty, especially if you're just playing around with it. If you're just playing around in the space. I find that just going with a smaller size is like less pressure, I don't feel so stressed, or, I'm not worried about how little space I'm taking up, because this is already like very manageable space. It's a small space that you're working with. So, I don't feel like I need to like spend so much time, right, filling up a big space. So flowers are like the only thing I can draw well. You are like me. I don't think I can draw anything else. I don't think, I have tried and have failed at drawing pretty much anything other than botanicals. And I think it's because flowers and, botanicals in general are so imperfect that like you literally could make it look similar to a flower and people will understand what you're trying to draw. Right? Like, when you look at something that looks like a flower, you'll think, oh, that's a flower, right? You don't question why it doesn't look perfect. So yes, I totally get that. So funny. I love to get some help or tips if you ever have the time. Yeah. Oh, junk journaling. Yeah, junk journaling is fun. Um, I do a lot more collaging or scrapbooking. As you know, if you used to back in the day do scrapbooking and stuff. But yeah, I do more collaging like with ephemera and things I collect on trips or along the way on, at events or things like that. So um, it is really, really fun, especially the freedom of just putting things down without any rules, and layering and kind of playing with, um, yeah, putting together just like whatever you want to use and whatever you want to do. I think I love that idea, right? I love where that comes from without any expectation of like you can only use certain things or it has to look a certain way or something. I have so many creative ideas, but I'm afraid to mess up. Yeah. Flowers can be imperfect. Yeah, exactly. There is no messing up when you're doing floral artwork, I think. It really is just like, it is what it is. Just go with it. Commit to the imperfection. Commit to the imperfection and it'll become what it's going to become. And yeah, I think for me, it's more so the process of, like when I'm drawing or painting flowers, it's more the process of doing it. That's where I get the most joy and the most fulfillment of creativity, I think. Um, Similar to anything where, you're letting yourself just be in the moment of doing it. And I think we can all find something that we enjoy where we kind of get lost in the moment and we're just, going with the flow of creating that. I think we can all sort of think of at least one thing where we tend to, lose ourselves. And that's the thing that you should be doing more of, for sure. I need to get into something real like this so I can gain my life back. Yeah, I felt so lost and just get stuck in bed, doom scrolling. Yeah, Jello, you are like a lot of us, and a lot of us here too. Yeah, I feel you on the doom scrolling, finding creative outlets. Yeah, for sure. Um, I always find that when I get bogged down with like overthinking, I'm a classic overthinker. I'm a classic sort of worrier. All my life, I just worry about things. It comes naturally to me. And to get myself out of that sort of cycle of constantly overthinking things, worrying about things, and it's just like noodling things all the time. One, I find stream of consciousness writing really helps. And it's just basically, the idea of sitting down either in the morning or at night or where, when you feel like you have a lot of thoughts on your mind and just putting it down on paper without filtering it, without, checking your grammar or making sure it makes sense, anything like that. Just putting words down on paper, for me really helps because a lot of times it's sort of those same stresses or those same worries that come up, or things that I'm thinking about for like I'm hyper fixated on the certain thing and it just needs to be put down on paper so that I can move on. And a lot of times that will help. And then the other thing is using color, in the form of painting or ink, fountain pen ink painting, or drawing. And the color and the movement of just, letting your hand work its way through something, I feel like pulls me out of just constantly being in my mind. So, yeah, when I say a lot of us feel you, it's true. A lot of us are kind of in that same sort of mindset where we could easily just, sit and just be on our phones or, scroll all day long. But I think you know, when you realize that that's where you're spending a lot of time, redirecting that to pulling out just a few supplies. If you're into writing, write. If you're into drawing, draw. And if you are just into, you know, being creative, then yeah, junk journaling or doing something where you don't put any rules on yourself so that there's no pressure, there's no expectation, and you're just doing art for, you know, feeling better. I think that's totally worth it. I think that's totally worth our time. I'll catch myself and say now, yeah, go paint or journal. A lot of times that's when I pull out my journal. And yeah, that's when I'm like, I need to put down my phone, or, you know, or I plug in an audiobook, podcast or something to listen to that will get me out of whatever funk or whatever sort of cycle I'm in, where I'm just like, I don't want to do anything. But a lot of times the doing something is helpful because it pulls you out of the not doing. So I am going to use the 05 mono drawing pen, like I mentioned before, because this is like, it's a small piece, so I don't want to distract from the color that I used. And also it won't take too long to dry. So we're just gonna go with that. When I'm using a fine liner like this mono drawing pen, I also have to be a little bit mindful of not pressing too hard, because obviously you don't want to damage the tip. But it is helpful to use a little bit of a broader tip so that you can sort of, you know, let the pen move naturally in the way that you want it to kind of glide on paper. But yeah, it's a nice way of using something, and also it's kind of like using a fountain pen, right? Where you're mindful of, like, you don't want to, nor do you need to press too hard to get it to write, right? Like it will write. Just worry about the angle that you're holding it at, and then kind of moving it across the paper, right? So it's another reason why I'd like to sometimes mix it up a little bit, not always use a dip pen or, you know, a specific tool, to kind of get myself to practice using other tools too. So that's the end piece. And as I mentioned before, again, you know, not to take away too much from the colors that are on the paper, so that we could still see some of that blending, some of those lighter colors, the darker colors kind of mixing in as well. I love sort of two-toned leaves and, you know, highlighting certain things and stuff. So very, very cool. Even if it's not perfect, right? Nothing is perfect. Oh, thanks so much for the follow, Jello. Welcome to the community. Or welcome to this end of the community, I guess. Oh, thank you, anonymous gifter. Thank you. That's so awesome. Well, enjoy your sub, and yeah, let this be a reminder for all of us to get out of, you know, our cycle of whatever it is that we're doing consistently or constantly, that maybe it's time we just get out our journals, get out our paints, our sketchbooks, or get another sketchbook with watercolor paper so that you could do, you know, painting on the go, or have it, you know, somewhere where it's like portable to use. You can grab it, open it up, and just do a little bit at a time. You know, you don't have to make it a big deal. You don't have to make it a big thing. It could just be something small that you build on over time. Like some of these are just, you know, colors, basically. I just put down colors. But over time, you'll find that it gets a little bit easier to pull out your supplies and to kind of just go with it. And then you become more confident too with whatever it is that you want to paint or draw. It doesn't have to be flowers, but as a non-drawer, right? I feel like flowers are really easy to do. Looks good. Do you label your watercolors too? I don't, just because I don't have, I do have a lot of them. I just don't really tend to go back to them, if that makes sense. Like, especially if I'm mixing them, I just like the look of having the swatches, just to be like, these are the colors that I use throughout the piece. If it's watercolor paint, it's more so when I do painting with inks that I want to label and swatch them, just because I like to go back and I like to see what inks I did use. A lot of times it's, you know, there are certain inks that I like painting with that I have found over time. For example, Wearingeul White Rabbit. I really don't like it in my fountain pen, just because I just don't find it as legible as other colors, and so I tend to just go with something else. But I love painting with it because it's such a good accent color, and it mixes really well with other colors as well, in terms of blending and stuff. So I like to label it because I will go back and check like which inks I'm using. So palette wise, like if I look back at this, I will know that it's this one, just because of the different types of palettes that I have. They're very specific. So yeah, like this was the same one, right? And I can just tell by the colors that I used, but a lot of it is like I've blended and mixed them. So it's, you know, it's just kind of interesting to see the different colors, I guess, versus the specific specific paints or the specific palette that I used. But the palette is labeled, so if I ever, you know, wanted to double check what the actual paint name is, I can always, I know that this was the palette that I used, so I can always go back and I can double check the names if I need more of the paint or something. So you have to go back to work, and I have to bounce too. Thanks so much for being here, G. Have a great week. Hopefully I'll see you next week on here. And yeah, whenever you can join is always a good time. But yes, so I hope you enjoyed the stream. I hope it encouraged you to take out your inks or your paints or whatever you're into, stationery wise. I hope you take it out and I hope you play with it. Find some time and just kind of enjoy it. Have fun. So like I mentioned like at the outset of this stream, I'm going to try and do twice a week streaming. My usual is Wednesday just because it's midweek, it's easy. So I usually do art and painting and stuff like that on the Wednesdays. But we'll try and do Mondays too. And for Mondays, next Monday, I'm pretty much going to do the same thing I did this Monday, which is get into my hemlock and oak planner. We're going to do some memory keeping. So this was what I did for last week. Very, very simple memory keeping. We're going to do this week on Monday. So we're going to look back on our week. And then in the daily pages, we're going to do a little bit more drawing, but using a reference. So we're going to look at actual flower photos in a book that I have called the Flower Color Guide. And we're going to pick out a random flower and we're going to draw it. And we're going to use Tombow mono drawing pens to add some of the color. So it's going to be fun, a fun time journaling, and it's an interesting thing for me because it's my first sort of step into a live journal with me stream, I guess. So we're going to do it again next Monday. So if you can join, that's cool. If you're going to watch the replay or the VOD, then that's also very, very cool. I appreciate you always. Thanks for being here. Thanks for being in the community. Thanks for being kind to everyone else. The flower pages you just show, what is the concept behind it? Ooh, these flowers, you mean. The concept behind it is, let me just close this. So the concept behind these pages is that while I like to do abstract floral art, I like to always kind of step back and practice fundamental sort of like drawing from a reference. And I use this book, the Flower Color Guide. And I say that as if I've been doing this for a long time, but in this book specifically, I've only done it for this year, like for January. But in the past, how I sort of started drawing flowers was by looking at reference photos. So I would look at reference photos of bouquets and flowers and just like practice sketching them out. And then I moved on to doing it from, real bouquets. So anytime I got a bouquet or I had flowers in real life, I would sort of look at the shapes that they make and try and sort of capture them in a drawing or a sketch. And so I thought this year I really want to commit to drawing from reference again, because for me especially, the more I draw or practice what I see in nature or what I see, the actual shape of flowers, the easier it becomes for me when I'm drawing abstract flowers to pull from memory of what those shapes were. And so instead of getting bored of doing the same shapes over and over, by looking at reference photos, it commits to my memory. Like there are different shapes. There are other sort of, look of flowers and botanicals that you can draw, right? They don't all have to look like a similar sort of shape of a flower. And so that's a concept. I want to get back to drawing flowers just based on a reference and whatever, I see, and try to commit that to paper. And then the prompt that I journal is from a book called The Pivot Year by Brianna West. And it's just every day there's sort of a passage or prompt, and I just hand letter a sentence or two. And then the rest I just sort of journal about with using a fountain pen. So All that to say is just using different stationery tools. So markers, brush pens, fountain pens to write with. So a little bit different than like the painting and the drawing that I do in my sketchbooks. So yeah, that's a long-winded way of explaining what I'm doing with this. I call it my memory keeper. So a long-winded way of saying what I'm using this book for. But if you can, join me on Monday and we'll talk more about it, and I'll sort of walk you through the process of how I'm doing it, so that, you know, if you want to do something similar, or if you want to, you know, journal in your own journal or do your own art while we're kind of hanging out, then you're more than welcome to. Yeah. Oh, thank you so much, Tori Tried. Your flower illustrations are gorgeous. Thanks so much. Yeah, I mean, it's all just like I try and practice it as much as I can, because I just feel like over time it just makes you more confident, so that even if you don't feel like it's perfect, it's okay. It's, you know, it's the practice, and it helps you sort of commit the shapes and the lines that you're drawing to memory. And so next time when you sort of take out your pen and you just want to draw or doodle a flower or a botanical or something, I feel like it's easier. It just comes more naturally because I've done it before. And, you know, my hand remembers those line techniques and stuff. So, yeah. So friends, have a great week. And hopefully I'll see you next week on stream. Or if, you know, or if we're hanging out in chat in other streams, you know, we'll say hey. So have a good week. Have a great day, friends. Thanks so much for being here. Hey, Bart, I love your timing. I love that you're jumping in. I hope you've been here a little while though, because I'm literally signing off. No problem, Tori Tried. Hope to see you again. But yeah, have a great week. Have fun. Zodiac pens, go make some pens. I'll talk to you later. Okay, bye friends.